You arrive in Montreal with 4 years of formal French education under your belt. You step off the plane, head down into the underground infrastructure, and feel prepared to navigate the city. You stop a local to ask for directions to a cafe. She smiles, gestures down the block, and says, "C'est là, c'est juste au bout de la rue. Ça marche?" You catch maybe 2 words. The confidence evaporates immediately. European linguistic standards often label this local speech as bad grammar or a lazy accent. This stigma has persisted for centuries, treating the Québécois dialect as a failed attempt at Parisian French. In reality, Montreal operates on a parallel frequency. The formal rules you learned in a classroom are a starting point, but they rarely cover the linguistic system used in the city's cafes and metro stations. The origin of this dialect starts in the 17th century, when colonists from Western France arrived to settle North America. A century later, in 1763, the British took control of the territory, and all ties back to France were severed. A vast ocean and a rigid political cutoff abruptly isolated the people of New France from the academic institutions and standardizing authorities in Paris. Cut off from its source, the language adapted to a massive, unforgiving continent. Speakers absorbed terms from indigenous nations to describe the local geography, and later integrated words from their English-speaking neighbors. 2 centuries of isolation preserved 17th century pronunciations that Paris long ago abandoned, creating a linguistic branch completely unique to this part of the world. Even familiar words can sound unrecognizable because of the systematic way Montrealers alter specific consonants before certain vowels. This diagram illustrates the affrication rule. When a clean T sound sits right in front of a U or I vowel, the consonant mechanically shifts into a sharp TS sound. The standard French word tu becomes tsu. The exact same operation happens with the letter D. When placed before an I sound, it changes into a DZ. The verb dear becomes désir. This phonetic shift is a rigorous, consistent feature of the dialect. It is used by everyone from neighborhood street vendors to television news anchors. Once you train your ear to expect these sounds, your brain begins to automate the translation. Suddenly, enormous chunks of the local dialect become recognizable. Beyond the sounds, the vocabulary itself is built for the city's specific institutions. You don't go to a generic convenience store here. You go to the dépanneur, or simply the dep, for cold beer and late-night groceries. The physical environment also demands its own terminology. While a Parisian might say it is froid, Montrealers use the word fret to describe the bone-chilling, sub-zero reality of a typical winter. You will also hear English verbs seamlessly absorbed into French grammar. People will canceller their plans or chiller on the weekend. This is the natural result of 2 populations sharing the same streets for centuries. Between the extreme winters and the complex bilingual reality, this vocabulary is engineered specifically for its environment. It fills the gaps standard textbooks miss. That adaptation extends directly to social interaction. The rigid European rules around the formal vous collapse on these streets. A barista or a stranger will default to the informal tu to build an immediate warm connection. Then you have the sacrés. These are the strictly local swear words, derived entirely from the artifacts and rituals of the Catholic Church. For generations, the clergy held immense power over the population. Working-class residents took the holiest words of the church, like the chalice and the tabernacle, and turned them into everyday linguistic rebellion. Today, you'll hear words like tabarnak and calice in constant rotation. They function as passionate exclamation points used to give ordinary stories momentum and emphasis. Arriving in the city with stiff formality and recoiling at the local profanity creates immediate social distance. Embracing these local norms is how you build genuine trust in a Montreal neighborhood. The people here spent decades fighting political battles to maintain their Francophone identity on a continent dominated by English. Their dialect is a hard-fought victory. When outsiders attempt to correct a Montrealer's grammar, they are unknowingly stepping on centuries of cultural defense. Using terms like ici or le bout signals that you have engaged with the culture on its own terms. It shows you recognize the language as a distinct and valid identity. Traditional language apps will only ever teach you how to speak in a rigid, standardized European format. That is why we built Street Tongue. It is an application designed specifically to bridge the gap between classroom French and the unwritten street dialects used in neighborhoods like the Plateau. The app puts you in AI scenarios built around real neighborhood interactions. You train on local vocabulary drills that skip the useless formalities and focus on what you will actually hear at the corner store. Go to streettongueapp.com to stop sounding like a textbook and start speaking the real language of the city. We want to hear from you down in the comments. What was the exact moment your classroom language skills failed you in the real world?